the story of the Titanic. We all feel like we know it, right? It's the ultimate tragedy, a huge cautionary tale.
It is, but when you really dig into the survivor testimonies, the actual engineering reports, it's so much more than just a sinking ship.
It's a staggering monument to ambition, really, to early 20th century ambition, and maybe the biggest lesson ever in technological hubris.
Absolutely. The scale of it is something we tend to forget.
Yeah.
I mean, construction started in Belfast in 1909, and they weren't just building a ship.
No, they were building a statement.
A huge one. The sources all say it, the largest, the strongest, the most beautiful moving object ever created by man.
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We want to get past that simple narrative. We're going to pull out the key facts, about the construction, the social dynamics on board, and that fatal chain of mistakes.
And critically, the safety rules that changed the world after it sank.
It all starts with the scale, with the Pride. It was over 269 meters long. Thousands of people worked on it for 3 years straight.
And they truly, genuinely believed they were building something that could not be sunk.
Which brings us right to the heart of it all. Let's call this Section 1, the floating palace and the unsinkable myth.
Well, that unsinkable tag was a huge marketing tool for the White Star Line. They were very aggressive about it.
And they had reason to be confident, they thought.
Oh, absolutely. The engineering was revolutionary for its time. A double-bottomed hull, 16 massive watertight compartments.
The electric doors you could shut from the bridge, right?
Instantly. The thinking was that no single accident could ever breach enough of them to be a real threat.
But, looking back at the sources, there were doubts, even back then. There are these documented whispers among some of the builders.
Right, the veteran sailors especially. Some of them felt it was too big, too heavy,
right,
that it was vulnerable because of its sheer mass.
And there was a more specific technical problem we only really understood later.
Yes, the rivets. Modern analysis of the hull plating they recovered shows the iron rivets, especially up in the bow sections, had a high slag content.
Which means what, exactly? In simple terms.
It means they were brittle, especially in freezing water. So on impact, instead of bending or shearing, they just popped. They failed completely.
So the engineers planned for the steel to tear, but not for the seams to just come apart.
Exactly. A totally different type of failure.
Let's pivot from the ship's structure to the social structure. Because on board, it was literally a different world depending on your ticket.
Oh, completely. If you were in first class, you were basically living in a floating palace. The opulence was designed to be better than the finest hotels in London or New York.
You think about that grand staircase with the huge glass dome over it.
The soft carpets, the golden fixtures. Some suites even had marble.
And the amenities are just wild. A heated saltwater swimming pool.
A full gym with electric machines, which was state-of-the-art. A squash court, Turkish baths.
There's a great anecdote from Lady Margaret, who apparently walked into her stateroom and just said, "This is more beautiful than my own home."
And it probably was. But then you contrast that so sharply with what was happening on the decks below.
Third class. Steerage.
Right. It was simple. Clean, but simple. Small cabins, bunk beds, shared bathrooms, no gold, no marble.
And yet, for those passengers, the journey meant so much more. It was everything.
These people weren't traveling for fun. They were traveling for hope. They were immigrants, families.
Fleeing poverty, trying to get to America for a new start. We know the story of Anna and her younger brother, Peter, who just dreamed of a safe future.
For them, this ship was everything. They'd likely spent every penny they had on that ticket. So while the conditions were basic, the Titanic was still, for them, a ship of dreams.
It's just that their dreams were about survival and opportunity, not luxury. It makes what happens next so much more tragic.
That pressure, the speed, the money, the dreams, it all leads us to Section 2, the ill-fated voyage and ignored warnings.
The departure from Southampton, April 10th, 1912. The atmosphere must have been electric.
It was. And Captain Edward Smith, he was a celebrity commander. This was his last voyage before retirement. He called it the finest ship I've ever commanded. The confidence was sky high.
But there was this underlying pressure to perform.
A huge economic pressure. The White Star Line wanted to impress the world, maybe not by winning the blue ribbon for speed, but by arriving in New York early.
So they were pushing it, traveling way too fast over 22 knots through an area they knew was filled with ice.
And that speed, combined with a critical procedural failure, created the disaster. And it all centered on the wireless room.
Right, this is such a crucial detail. The operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, They didn't actually work for the ship.
No, they were employees of Marconi Company. Their main job, the thing that made the money, was sending telegrams for the wealthy passengers. Commercial traffic.
So when warnings about icebergs started coming in from other ships,
They got buried. They were just stacked up with all the other Marconograms. They didn't seem urgent because they weren't the priority. The priority was the passenger messages.
and then came the most critical warning of all.
The most tragic one. Around 10:30 p.m., a nearby ship, the Californian, had actually stopped moving because it was completely surrounded by ice.
And they sent a message, right?
A very clear, very urgent warning. The operator basically said, "We are stopped and surrounded by ice."
But Phillips, the Titanic's operator, was busy.
He was swamped, and he got annoyed by the interruption. He basically snapped back, "Shut up, I'm busy, I'm working Cape Race."
And that was it. That life-saving message never, ever made it to the bridge.
Never. And at the same time, the weather conditions were just conspiring against them. It was a clear night, but there was no moon.
It was pitch black.
And the sea was unnaturally calm, like glass. Which sounds good, but it's incredibly dangerous for spotting ice.
Right, because you usually spot an iceberg from the waves breaking against its base, that line of white foam.
Exactly. With a calm sea, there's no foam. The lookouts, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, were up in the crow's nest with nothing but their own eyes, staring into absolute blackness.
So you have ignored warnings, excessive speed, and terrible visibility.
It all came together at 11:40 p.m.
The lookouts see it. A black mass less than a quarter-mile away. They sound the warning.
And on the bridge, First Officer William Murdoch reacts immediately. "Hard to starboard! Stop the engines!"
But it's too late. The ship is just too big, moving too fast.
It takes forever for the rudder to even start to turn the ship. And in that split second, he had to make an impossible choice. Hit it head on or try to swerve.
He swerved, exposing the side of the ship.
He did. And the impact wasn't a big, loud crash. Survivors described it as a long, low, grinding noise.
The sound of those brittle rivets popping out one after another as the iceberg sliced open the hole below the waterline.
Tearing open 5 separate massive holes.
Which brings us to Section 3 and the deadly math.
Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, he was on board. He was summoned to assess the damage.
And he delivered the verdict.
He did. The Titanic was designed to stay afloat if 4 of its watertight compartments flooded. 4. But the iceberg had breached 5.
And once 5 were flooding, the bow would dip so low that water would just spill over the top of the bulkheads into the next compartment and the next.
An unstoppable chain reaction. He gave the ship maybe 2 hours. The unsinkable ship was doomed.
And then the lifeboats.
Yeah.
This might be the worst failure of all.
It's just horrifying. The ship was carrying over 2,200 people. The lifeboats could only hold about 11,178.
Barely half. How is that even possible?
Outdated regulations. The rules were from 1894, and they were based on a ship's tonnage, not its passenger count.
That's just bureaucratic insanity.
It is. The Titanic was so big it actually carried more lifeboats than the rule required. They had 20, but it still wasn't nearly enough.
So the moment the crew knew, the call went out. Women and children first.
Which led to immediate, heartbreaking chaos, families being torn apart in an instant.
You think of Anna and Peter again? Her testimony later described how she physically shoved her little brother into one of the early lifeboats.
Knowing. She must have known. She promised him she'd find another boat, but she was ensuring he survived.
That one act of love in all that terror, it's unbelievable.
And that brings us to Section 4. Amidst all the chaos, there was incredible bravery and sacrifice.
You have to start with Thomas Andrews, the designer.
He knew the ship was lost. He knew the math better than anyone, but he didn't even try to save himself.
No, he spent his last moments walking the decks, telling confused passengers to put on their life jackets and get to the boats.
He was last seen just standing in the first-class smoking room, having done everything he could for everyone else. A true hero.
And what about the engineers? The stokers, down in the belly of the ship?
Their sacrifice is just as profound. They stayed at their posts in the freezing, flooding engine rooms.
Why? To do what?
To keep the power on. The lights had to stay on to prevent mass panic, and the wireless needed power to keep sending distress signals. They bought precious time for the survivors.
Knowing they would never get out themselves.
Knowing they were sealing their own fates.
And then there's the band. The image is so iconic.
It is. Wallace Hartley and his musicians. They gathered on deck and just played calm, gentle music. from ragtime to hymns, like "Nearer, my God, to thee," providing this strained, surreal sense of peace in the middle of terror.
And the courage wasn't just the crew.
Not at all. It crossed all class lines. We have accounts of a third-class passenger, John, who got his mother and sister onto a boat, and then later, while clinging to wreckage, managed to save a baby.
While you had first-class figures like Colonel Astor, one of the richest men in the world, who made sure his wife was safely in a lifeboat and then just stepped back. He knew the rule, and he accepted it.
The final moments of the ship must have been terrifying. The bow sinking deeper, the stern rising up out of the water.
Almost vertical. You could see the giant propellers.
And then this loud, deep groaning sound as the strain became too much. The ship broke in two.
And the lights, kept on by those brave engineers, they flickered one last time and went out, plunging everything into darkness.
Followed by the sounds. The collective cries of 1,500 people in the freezing water, a sound that the survivors said haunted them for the rest of their lives.
The rescue ship, the RMS Carpathia, didn't arrive until dawn. They pulled just over 700 survivors from the lifeboats. Over 1,500 lives were lost.
The world was just stunned. Utterly shocked. How could this happen? This symbol of modern power.
And that shock led directly to our fifth and final section, the enduring legacy and mandatory change.
The public outcry was immediate and ferocious. Something had to change, and it did very quickly.
This is the real silver lining of the tragedy. It led to life-saving changes that transformed sea travel forever. First, and most obvious,
Lifeboats for everyone. A new international rule was passed requiring every single ship to carry enough lifeboats for every person on board.
ending that absurd tonnage-based rule.
Gone forever. And they also established the International Ice Patrol.
To monitor icebergs in the North Atlantic, a system that's still in place today.
And finally, they addressed that communication failure. The new rules required wireless rooms to be manned 24 hours a day, constantly monitoring for distress signals.
So a commercial message could never again silence a cry for help.
Never again. The wreck itself was finally found in 1985, lying in two pieces over 3,800 meters down. But the legacy isn't really the ship.
No, it's the lesson. It's the lesson that our ambition has to be balanced with a deep respect for nature and with rigorous procedure.
And Anna, the survivor who lost her brother, she honored his memory every April 15th. She used to say, "It's not just about the ship, it's about the people."
That really does sum it all up. The Titanic is the ultimate symbol of what happens when technological overconfidence hits a hard limit.
It was a failure of procedure, of communication, of preparedness, all fueled by pride and a need for speed.
So we saw these huge mandatory global safety changes come out of that disaster in 1912. But it makes you think about our world now.
It does.
Think about our own modern unsinkable technologies, our complex financial systems, our global infrastructure, even something like AI. We hear the same things. It's too advanced, too complex to fail.
So the question that the Titanic leaves for you, for all of us, is this. Despite everything we learned, are we still letting speed or pride or commercial interests override basic caution? What systemic icebergs are we ignoring right now just because we're too busy or too confident in our own creations? That's the lesson that never sinks.